Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Improve Your People Analytics. Now I'd like to introduce your speakers for today. Chris Moore, founder and CEO of Zeroed In People Analytics. Chris founded Zeroed In 18 years ago to close the large gap in measurement and reporting that he discovered during his tenure as a chief technology officer in the evolving talent management space 20 plus years ago. Today, as CEO of Zeroed In, Chris sets the vision and strategy for the company. He works closely with his team and with Zeroed In's clients to help them get the most value from their investment in people analytics. We also have Keith Good, Vice President of Client Success with Zeroed In and People Analytics. He also works closely with HR and IT practitioners to ensure their Zeroed In customer experience and return on investment are always at their peak. Keith has been implementing and supporting HCM and BI solutions for over 20 years. He leads a team of data scientists who put their problem-solving, data transformation, and predictive modeling skills to work for Zeroed In clients. And with that, Chris, you now have the floor.
Great, thanks. It's great to be with you all. And we're going to be covering a number of topics coming up, and we'll overview those in a few minutes. I welcome my colleague, Keith Good. And while it was not promoted as part of this webinar, we're very pleased to be joined by two of our colleagues and clients, Mr. Steve Terry, who's the VP of Total Rewards with Dollar Tree Family Dollar, and Mr. Olaf Sakovich, who is the Senior Manager of HR Analytics and Operations with Dollar Tree and Family Dollar. So welcome, gentlemen. It would be great if you could share a little bit about Dollar Tree and Family Dollar, some quick facts, and they're also going to share some of their struggles, some of their the value that they're seeing in their people analytics investment, and I'll put the floor to you, Steve.
Great. Chris, Keith, thanks for having us. Just real quick, again, my name is Steve Terry, and I lead Total Rewards for Dollar Tree. We are a Fortune 200 company. For those of you not familiar with us, we operate under the brands Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, and Dollar Tree Canada. We have nearly 16,000 stores across 48 states and 5 Canadian provinces. And we also operate 26 distribution centers in the U.S. Generally, we have about 200,000 employees, but this time of year in the holidays, that definitely flexes up to well above 200,000.
Sounds like you have a good reason to invest in people analytics.
Absolutely. We needed the help.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I'd like to just cover some of the topics. We're going to talk about people analytics at its core and how it can improve your business. Why HR struggles with people analytics. What are some of the best practices to implement to kind of break through those struggles? We're going to highlight some of the top 9 people analytics insights that we curate and help our clients get better insight to. And we're also going to hear from Dollar Tree, from Steve and Olaf, on again some of their experiences with people analytics, both kind of before, during, after, and future. So with that in mind, I'm going to shut my video off here and kind of focus on some of the content. So let's jump right in. As you all know, we live in a data-driven world, but the majority of organizations don't really capitalize on that, not just with their business transformation efforts, but with their people data strategy as well. So McKinsey recently did a survey that presented these results. And Keith, is there a correlation?
Well, that's a great point, Chris. Correlation doesn't always mean causation. However, you have to believe if you have a strong people analytics strategy, it's certainly going to have an impact as you're in your business, as we've seen throughout our client base.
Well, so this begs the question then, if we don't have a good people analytics strategy, or maybe we're starting on that, but we need to really shore it up, how do we do that in a way that really helps us improve our business? So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what people analytics is. I'm guessing the majority of people on the webinar do, but let's define it briefly. It's the process of, collecting, cleaning, making sense of employee and related data to make informed decisions. We include that related data because operational data like sales, productivity measures, safety, even external data like unemployment rates, salary benchmarks, really helps provide that complete picture. So it's not that just the data within your four walls. Sometimes you have to think outside of there as well. To take it a step further, our friend Josh Burson, many of you know Josh from his relationship with human resource executive, HR tech. Josh says that people analytics allows businesses to really understand the way they operate, improve productivity and performance, reduce turnover, and make work better for people. For those of you, like I said, who know Josh, you know that he speaks wisely in the HR tech space. And he's identified a couple of ways that it helps the organization, but if we really begin to peel back the layers and think about the employee life cycle, you have to start at the top, right, on the hiring side, and include, attracting and sourcing talent. And it begins to shed light on all the HR process elements throughout the life cycle where people analytics plugs in, to really begin to quantify facts, whether it's open requisitions, number of applicants, time to fill, days to onboard. As soon as they're onboarded, you have to think about retention and engagement and developing those individuals to drive performance, to produce productivity. And then ultimately, we want those individuals to succeed. And throughout that whole process, there's various movements that occur, right? There's promotions, demotions, there's laterals. There's all of the characteristics of both the employer and the employee and their demographics. There's the whole compensation world. And ultimately, whether they succeed within your organization or they separate, voluntary or involuntary, it ends that relationship. But that information doesn't go away. That becomes a foundation from which to mine and understand the good and the bad that happened throughout, the life cycle of all those employees, so that you can, in turn, make better decisions moving forward. So, how do we put this in play? How do we take all those measures and facts and really help them drive business results? It starts with a concept of what gets measured gets funded. Because at its core, you're doing a lot of this work, I suspect, in your organizations. You're reporting and you're using data visualization tools, think dashboards, charts, and graphs, and they're real good at identifying effects, such as rising turnover or, higher absenteeism. And we know the what, right? So we know it's turnover. We know when it's happening, perhaps. We probably even know where it's happening. But we're missing the why, right? Why is it happening? Why is turnover occurring? Or why is absenteeism or overtime occurring? And that's really where analytics comes into play. Through techniques such as pattern analysis and explainable AI, we're able to identify root causes. And then once you know the causes or the levers that can be pulled, then you're able to monetize the impact on the business by taking the magnitude of the effects that you're seeing and multiplying it by the cost to the business. And with that information, you can build a business case for change. And that's what HR is all about, right? Helping to drive change within the organization. And that's how you impact and improve the business. It makes sense, right? All right. Let's shift to the struggle. So we know people analytics is good for the business, but HR has historically struggled with really getting people analytics through, the different levels of maturity, if you will. It seems like a simple concept, collecting the data, visualizing it, analyzing, comparing it, but we all know it's difficult to do consistently and efficiently without the right process and the right tools. Hence the challenge, right? Steve, Olaf, you've experienced this, right? Whether it's the tools that IT says, hey, we've got Cognos. We want you to use Cognos, or we've got Tableau, or we've got X or Y, and you have certain resources and different systems. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks, Chris. You kind of teed up all the challenges that we face every day and really brought us to partner with you guys. I think HR isn't the first place that gets the investment dollars. Most of us deal with that day in and day out, year to year. And for Dollar Tree specifically, I mean, we grew very quickly and had a significant acquisition of Family Dollar several years ago. And so we found ourselves with a great need and great demand for data, reporting, analysis. But we were dealing with many, many disparate systems, legacy platforms, systems that weren't designed for the organization that we are today. And that required a lot of patchwork, a lot of extraction of data, and then trying to compile the data to make sense of it. So it was really just a time demand, resource demand, and we couldn't be responsive to our internal customers quickly, which led us to start looking for, there's got to be a better way. And we evaluated the time and cost to build and do this ourselves in-house. Like you said, IT, partnering with them. Do we have the resources within HR? And ultimately, we determined that to be responsive and to have a product or service to deliver, we would be much better off to partner with someone like Zeroed In. And I believe we found the right partner in you guys. I do emphasize partner is key. It's a journey. We know that. It's not you turn on one feed and the lights are on and we're ready to go. And we're bringing in many, many system feeds, and it will take time to get us fully ramped up and to change management for ourselves of the access and bringing our internal customers along as well. So it's a journey, and to us, it was important to have a partner along with us on that journey versus just do an implementation.
Oh, great feedback. Appreciate that. With these data points, the last point about, data's in too many places, hard to consolidate. We know you have many different systems that, whether it's your core HR, your applicant tracking, your performance, your learning management systems, your benefits, maybe you have grievance and other types of systems. That in lies the challenge, right? Is how do we bring it all together into a single place? And one of the struggles that we see a lot is with the data itself. There's an old saying, data everywhere, but not a drop to drink, right? And we sort of blame that on the 3Ds, right? Disparate data, some in the cloud, some on premise, different formats. Dirty data, HR data is traditionally manually entered. As a result, there's lots of discrepancies. There's lots of need to organize it in a way, converge it, fix it, but it needs to be done efficiently, repeatedly. So it's more of a consistent cycle. Yeah. And then there's the actual delivery of it as well. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, Chris, I was just going to say regarding that dirty data, where we see a lot of that in a lot of our client sites, is that, keep in mind that the HR data has been entered by people across multiple different platforms where the processes and procedures often change. So what we typically see is pre and post data transactions, different abbreviations, different spellings, and we have tools that can help us quickly bring all those together so that things are presented under a common domain.
Right, and then once you do that, you've got to deliver the data securely, target it to the right people, have it in the right format, give them what they need when they need it. And again, these are kind of the struggles that HR faces when you look to do it yourself. And as Steve mentioned, everybody, they started doing it themselves and they had some success. We'd love to learn from you all through this poll, and in the on the right-hand side, you're going to see the poll questions come up. We'd love to learn, where are you struggling? Is it the data integrity, Is it aggregating disparate data, building dashboards? Maybe there's an influx of ad hoc reporting that just keeps coming and coming and coming, ad hoc requests. Curating the insights, getting it to those who need it, or maybe you're looking for resources to help you with that, and that's a struggle in and of itself with the current labor market. Olaf, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, as we were talking about these questions, I know you were thinking kind of letters A, D, and F were kind of that defensive standpoint where you're, kind of order taking and working at the initial task, where I was thinking letters B and E were kind of that more mature offensive task that you're doing as you gain more experience in this.
Yep. We're going to show the poll results as soon as they're available. Olaf, were there a couple of these that stood out for you all?
Yeah, so again, as we were preparing the slides, we kind of joked that in a way, this all of the above is one of the answers here as well. We had a bit of everything here for sure that we could have checked. Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like the poll results are in, and aggregating disparate data seems to rank pretty highly behind building dashboards and getting the right insights to the right people. So we did this poll recently with another group and found that building dashboards happened to be one of the highest among that group, but I'm not surprised at these others. All right, great. So go ahead and close out the poll then, and we'll advance here. So when we talk about delivery of the data, right, getting the data to the right people, you have to do that in an efficient way, in a way that can scale. It's got to be simple, right, because you don't have time to gather all the data manually. You have to be able to target it and distribute it to the right people, and you need to do it in a way that's tailored for those users and give them the ability to discover and ask questions and really provide the insights that they're looking for. So how do we do this, right? There's clearly a set of best practices, whether you're attempting to do it yourself and you're going to proceed down that route, or perhaps a hybrid approach, with a partner, or a full partner relationship, kind of our match for less, and ask a partner really to take this on. So how do we overcome these challenges? All right. One of the first practices is really to build, a culture of evidence-based decision-making, and you have to encourage that within your workforce and within your management community. But to do that, you've got to make the evidence available, and you have to make it accessible. And you have to do it in a way that's comparable, and can, in doing that to see the sort of the yin and the yang and the benchmarks, and you need to tell a story with the data. And HR is in a perfect position to lead by example here, because you're today doing a lot of the reporting for your managers, and whether you're spoon feeding it through PowerPoints and PDFs or otherwise, there's a way to tell a story with the data and set that example and kind of lead them to somewhat of a self-service initiative.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, the lead by example reminds me of a client that utilized our flight risk model that generated a predictor of people at high risk of leaving the organization. And then they targeted that to specific managers that could either generate a total comp statement or a stay survey and have the conversations with people directly impacted.
Excellent. So how do we make the evidence available and accessible? Well, another best practice is to actually build a data pipeline that gathers, cleans, and curates the insights in an automated fashion. Many of you probably have a data lake, and that's a good starting point, but sometimes a data lake can turn into a data swamp, and it just becomes really messy. So Keith, why don't you walk us through this concept of the data pipeline?
Sure thing. Building that data pipeline really requires some skills and tool sets such as ETL. The E stands for extract. Think of vacuuming and sucking in as much data as you can get or gain access to. Even if you plan to use certain data in a later phase, don't let it slow you down. You can always come back and add it into your environment. The T in ETL stands for transformation. This is the key of building things that are reproducible. So each month you're not spending hours and hours doing the same cleaning and aggregation tasks. This is often the biggest hurdle we see. Of course, the L stands for loading. The process needs to be able to support large volumes of data, including full historical data sets that maybe you just ingest once, but then ongoing data changes that come in daily, weekly, even monthly have to be accommodated for as well. This all goes into what we call a staging environment, as Chris mentioned, a data lake. And from here, you'll be able to start tuning the data into metrics and measurements. All these kind of require some skills such as SQL for cleaning and aggregating data. You could utilize tools like R or Python for correlating and developing predictive models. And finally, preparing all that into a schema for a presentation layer, which is really where the rubber meets the road. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about that presentation layer?
Yeah, well, the presentation layer requires the analytics model. So let's hit on that first. You know, the analytics model that you mentioned is really what makes kind of expedient access to insights available. Because this is really where you take all that staged data, that your data lake, right, and you begin to organize it into curated insights and facts. So think of this as you know, a set. You've heard the concept of analytics cubes, right? So this is what your analytics model is it's a set of structures that maintain all those facts and the characteristics around the facts, what are called dimensions. And there's different structures. There's star schemas and galaxy schemas, and but behind the scenes, those dimensions start with periods of time, right? So you want to start pre-aggregating your facts by week, by month, by quarter, by year, and then all the characteristics of the workforce. Your organizational hierarchy, your jobs and positions, both your employment demographics and employee demographics. And in doing that, you're able to quantify things like headcount and movements, promotions, demotions, lateral moves, compensation, average pay, total pay, pay changes, and not just those particular amounts, but how about the time between them? How many days between a pay change? How many days between a promotion? So it's quantifying all of these various facts in a way that's easily accessible for the user community. So once that's done, now you can think about presentation, right? So when we think about the presentation, we find that companies have come to expect dashboards, right? But they need to be targeted and role-based. So they're discoverable and targeted at each individual or, you know, a group of individuals. But in many times, the data can't stand on its own. It needs context. So this is where the concept of data rooms comes into play. Now, how can we tell the story with the data, describe it, provide analyst guidance, notes, information that helps the user community understand it better and use it in a way that's meaningful? There's also the concept of scorecards, setting up key performance indicators and measuring strategies. Now, all of this kind of comes from the quantitative facts that are in your cubes, but there's also information that's available in the workforce itself. And this can be mined through surveys, right? Think about workforce lifecycle surveys, new hire surveys, job change surveys, exit surveys, even your engagement and culture surveys, which may not be as frequent. Those are important aspects that allow you to compare and correlate to drive certain outcomes, in this case related to engagement. And then there's the predictive talent indicators, right? So being able to use predictive modeling to help really see around the corner. Keith, what are some of the predictive analytics that you're working with the clients?
Right, Chris. So obviously the one that most people are quite aware of is a flight risk predictor, utilizing past records and data to help identify factors that are going to use to determine if a person's at risk of leaving the organization. But there's all kinds of other things. Rising stars, trying to figure out who are going to be the next leaders based off of previous leaders and previous performance and other types of metrics. Best hire is another type of business problem that can be solved through predictive models.
Got it. All of this comes at a cost, right? It takes time and effort to build that data pipeline, curate all the facts yourself. Then you have to build and maintain the dashboards in a way that are meaningful for all the different user groups within your organization. And then you're going to be, your clients kind of expect that white glove service. We call it the workforce analytics concierge, where they're going to continually come to you asking you for more and more things and clarifications and can we do this and ad hoc requests. So we've been able to help our clients really deliver people analytics in a meaningful way, fairly efficiently and cost effective in providing these types of services. We were really set to give you a glimpse of how Zeroed In delivers, and what we found was with WebEx, the video itself was extremely granular. So Human Resource Executive is going to be following up to all of you with an email link to this particular video on YouTube. It's a 4-minute, 50-second video on YouTube that you'll be able to play and really get an insight of how a solution like Zeroed In delivers people analytics. So we're going to kind of skip that for now and kind of give that homework to y'all, and I think you'll find it quite interesting. So the question begs, do you do this all yourself, or do you partner with an organization that has some experience with it, right? The old way, we talked about all those struggles, locked away in the cloud, on-premise. It's tedious, difficult to scale. With a partner that can provide a software as a service solution, it kind of takes at least that piece of people analytics off the plate and allows you to focus more on the insights in the business than those tedious aspects of data collection, data cleansing, data aggregation. Steve and Olaf, I'd love to share some of your takeaways and some of the additional best practices and thoughts, and as this slide indicates, some of your efficiencies.
Sure, Chris. Thanks for that tee up. And you've really highlighted the challenges that bring this to life with this example. In our environment and market today, there's growing desire, request, and even disclosure requirements for human capital data. And it's in our systems. It was in ours. But the way to extract it and organize it in a meaningful way was, we're conservative here in saying it took a week, sometimes it may be 10 days to pull it together into a meaningful reporting in the way that our leaders wanted to see it, as well as to share it internally or with our shareholders and the regulatory community as well. So that's what we've been maintaining for a couple years on a manual basis, and it was difficult to replicate. Every time it was requested, we had to go through the process again. and it's just labor-intensive, human resources to get it done. Now that we've implemented this capability with zeroed in, a lot of that manual activity, that data scrubbing is taken care of on a routine automated fashion. And so we literally are able to do this in less than an hour now when we get to request. And our end users, as we deliver access, dashboards, et cetera, our end users will have the ability to look at some of this on the real-time basis themselves. So it's really a game changer for us on where we invest our time, not just in preparing, but now we can actually look at where we stand, how we're trending, different initiatives that are in play and that likely affect the analytics that really deliver the insights for our leaders and for the organization.
Great. Olaf, you were responsible for a lot of this process, and I recall and know there were some elements that were part of the reporting process that weren't actually in your HR system or weren't in, natively in any of the, the system data, so to speak.
Correct. So this also kind of forced us to realize, that there's opportunities here in terms of improving our hierarchies and data. So we actually create a custom hierarchy that really speaks to the needs of our top executives. And again, it's semi-automated right now, so it's definitely a huge step forward for what we've done before.
Right. So being able to really, reclassify, bin individuals out of your HR system into other categories for reporting, it just becomes part of that data pipeline now.
Exactly.
Yep. Great. Excellent. Excellent. So I think it's time for another poll. I mean, what if you had another 39 hours each week, in your analytics team, right? Now, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but what would you do? Would you tackle more ad hoc report requests? Would you clean more dirty HR data? Produce more Excel pivot tables? I know a lot of people still use Excel. Build more static dashboards and PowerPoints that get distributed and stale in a couple weeks? Or would you research and execute ways to scale your people analytics? Maybe you're just going to take some well-needed PTO because all the time and effort that goes into kind of doing that data pipeline yourself is quite extensive. Well, let's wait a few seconds here for the poll to come out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this ends up, Chris. I think PTO is looking pretty good, but letter E, that research and execute ways to scale out your analytics seems to be a kind of a higher level effort compared to
certainly more strategic thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that can be done during the PTO, right? You can, while you're on the beach, you can research and execute ways to scale your people analytics initiative. Well, it's no surprise. It looks like most people did select research and execute ways, but we appreciate your participation in that. So let's jump ahead and talk about some of the most common insights that organizations need to really get a handle on their workforce and what we see with our clients. And many people analytics platforms will curate these insights automatically for you. Certainly Zeroed In does that. And it really starts with your staffing, right? And this is really staffing and recruiting. This is headcount at its best. And this is where understanding your workforce begins. You have to know what you have before you know what you need, right? So look, headcount drives so many things, and we always start with that with our clients. We use it to validate. One, to validate the data pipeline process, to validate the distribution process, the aggregation process. Olaf, you have some experience on the validation side. Was that a simple process, or what? what we're
We thought it would be a simple process, but definitely, the devil's in the details. Yeah, it took a while, but it's very much worth it. You think you know your data and you know your data structures, but it really allowed us to appreciate all the data we have, appreciate the issues that are out there that are just kind of native to years of not policing well, maybe. But again, it definitely allowed us to have better results. And then if better results were not achieved, that also allowed us to kind of pinpoint the issues that we need to work on internally from data quality point of view. So yeah,
Yep.
definitely an effort that was needed on our side.
Yeah, and from understanding the process you went through, it helped build trust, right, in the data
Absolutely.
and the process itself. Because when you could see that you're getting the same data, same results, and sometimes better, right, better results through the analytics platform than what the core HR was providing, because the core HR, was in some case just snapshot reporting.
Correct. So exactly, with zero in, we're actually with validation, we're able to actually prove that zeroed in definitions are now more accurate and are looking at exactly what we want to be in a given time period or given time point. So yeah.
Sure. Great. Thanks for that. So looking at staffing and recruiting, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, Chris, I was just going to add one more thing. You made a point earlier about so much of HR data, the starting point is human input. And our customers sometimes don't realize, and to Olaf's point, it's raised the recognition with our end users that we've got to focus on the data integrity at the front end as well. Because people data, it starts somewhere, somebody's got to key in that or input, even if it's the hire, that data and make sure it's right. Otherwise, it's going to come through and not give the results you're expecting. So it's definitely tightened up our protocols and routines with our operational teams, but also our end users as well.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that. So back to the staffing, with staffing and recruiting, we're going to hit on some of these nine insights. Behind these insights are various, quantified facts, whether it's head counts, open recs, candidate pools, and think about all the common characteristics between, if you're able to link, your candidate pools, your applicants, your hires, to see, things like previous employers, previous tenures with those employers, previous experience, you begin to see a complete picture, as you're beginning to analyze the workforce.
Yeah, Chris, we've seen actually a kind of a two-pronged benefit with recruiting data. One, obviously you can utilize the insights to make your HR recruiting team more effective and more efficient in its processes, but also providing valuable insights to those line managers and field managers on the provisioning of new employees.
Yep. One of the next insights we always highlight, and one of the services that kind of draws clients to Zeroed In is really looking at productivity and looking at what gets done, right? Whether that's sales, whether that's distribution, whether it, other productivity measures, and being able to compare that, not as a productivity, not as a, financial measurement tool per se for the organization, but in the context of the workforce, looking at how do the workforce decisions drive productivity and vice versa. Steve, we've had some experience working with you all with your store sales numbers, store shrink, distribution center volumes. Can you share a little bit about that and the value that brings to Dollar Tree?
Sure, Chris. And I will say, I said earlier, this is a journey. But that's one of the great benefits is we didn't set out to just look at the people data. we wanted to also tie it into our operational KPIs, the business metrics, to draw those insights and connections. And we're along that way. We haven't fully integrated that yet, but that is definitely our priority and point of focus we're in right now of enabling with the additional data feeds to draw those connections, because it's not just people and it's not just the business KPIs, it's how do those intersect and what does that tell us to make our business better.
Yep, thank you. It's what, we like to call that the big picture. So where productivity is what gets done, performance is a bit of how it gets done, right? A little more subjective. It's, most people still have a performance management process in place that typically drives, compensation. It's a little softer, but it aligns and desired outcomes with the proper skills and knowledge, and it's measurable. So providing insight, from a performance perspective is always key to clients. And, in absence of real productivity measures, in many cases, performance is the next best thing. So providing insights on performance is always key to clients so that they know where improvements can be made. And again, they can anticipate disruptions to keep things on track for the organization. The next insight, and this is a big one because it's tied to, hard dollars, particularly in the Great Resignation race here, is turnover. So I can imagine Olaf with an organization like Dollar Tree in the retail space, turnover can be a challenge. So you talk a little bit about getting your arms around turnover and what that's like. And
absolutely. So, it's worth pointing that obviously we had all those measures available to us before, maybe not actually. So ZI allowed us to focus on key measures versus just, doing reporting. And so we had a previous turnover, IT-owned reporting, but it was still giving us directional information. But there were questions, how things are done and so on. So with 200,000 associates that we have, we needed accurate, timely counts, that led to actionable results versus a giant Excel spreadsheet that just kind of gives you a number and it doesn't tell you the story. So with Zero In, we were able to, number one, fully own the definition of turnover, what turnover is, right? So again, and you may say, well, you don't know what a turnover is. It's really easy, right? It's just terminations over average headcount. But again, we dove into every definition here. What is termination? It's exactly what is it the date a person terminated? Was it the date it was entered into the system? What's average headcount? Is it annualized, 12-month running? Is it for a given period? Again, we really looked at every aspect of what brings turnover in to make it accurate and actionable. And what we end up creating in Zero In is actionable results that allow to drill in to really focus on areas that need help. And it also showed us, different associates, for example, DCs have a different turnover than our stores. So it allowed us to, again, kind of see where the pain points are. And then again, with Zero In, we looked at 10 different tenures that we were not looking at before. So before we kind of looked at what's happening with an associate within a 90-day of their starting with the company. And with Zero In, we went way more granular. So we went to 30, 60, 90 days, and that really told us a very different story and actionable story. So as before we had turnover calculation that told us something, now we can definitely say where there are issues for what group of associates, and right now, there are actual actions being taken to correct that, hopefully. So that's definitely Zero In allowed us to visualize that, again, examine all the data points and made it very much actionable.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Turnover, this is the other point that really provides the input for, areas like flight risk and identifying, because you're using turnover that's occurred in the past to predict turnover in the future. And as Olaf stated, with turnover, not only do you have the terminations, but you have, the current workforce, because of the denominator is your average head count. So you're seeing people who are both terminating and staying, and you're able to use that in a way to produce predictive, a predictive model in the past that can ultimately be used to tell you why people are terminating through explainable AI. So moving ahead into we'll get to mobility, and this is really all of the transactions that are occurring within the employee life cycle: the promotions, the demotions, the lateral moves, changes within department, changes within job, changes at pay rate, changes within employment status. People go on workman's comp, they go on leave, they terminate, they come back. Employees get reinstated, they get rehired. So there's lots of activities happening that need to be accounted for. And these all help, again, tell the story of what's happening within the workforce.
Yeah, Chris, one of the key things is the effective dated employee record for, measuring the mobility. Without that, you really can't trend, things moving forward. So, and knowing that the data comes from multiple different systems, finding one place where you can go and say, okay, this is what a person looked like at any given point in time. You really need an analytics system to do that.
Right. So that's the data pipeline that's building that effective dated set of records from which you can mine all of your analytics facts. Labor hours and pay, and not to underplay compensation, there's an important relationship here to productivity, to performance, to retention, looking at outliers, looking at overtime and the risk that plays to the organization. So being able to really understand, kind of the contribution of the workforce and the compensation to the workforce is key. Another insight is engagement. With engagement, there's a strong relationship, to, kind of improving the company culture, driving operational excellence. And, when we think about, the employee life cycle, being able to capture the sentiment and feedback along the way, measure that and compare that and use that to drive the outcomes is key. Many organizations do this with a partner that is, collecting engagement, sentiment on an annual basis, maybe semi-annual, maybe you're using pulse surveys. It's really important that you're able to integrate that in to your data lake and use that as part of the mix to help you drive results. Zeroed In does integrate a survey component to help do that kind of in one central place, but it's very often as well that we're pulling in external data sets from an existing partner as well. Diversity inclusion, we touched on this briefly with the initiative that Steve shared with us, but this is key in understanding today's workforce and ensuring that there's identifying where there are gaps in the diversity, that there's equitable pay, and really putting a focus and lens around this. Steve, is there any comments that you would want to make on the importance of this to Dollar Tree?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I alluded to it earlier, but it is really a part of our evolving business. Again, I've referenced we acquired Family Dollar several years ago, and the effects of COVID-19 has really been impactful to our business as an essential business, and everything has been accelerated, including the focus on our people, with an emphasis on diversity, inclusion, DEI as part of the employee experience and life cycle. So
Excellent.
having zeroed in at this time is extremely helpful and beneficial to us as our people strategy evolves.
Great, thanks. And then the last piece is not the last, but another kind of one of the insights that clients really look to people analytics to understand more is on the learning and development side. And again, its relationship to other parts of the workforce life cycle. So, a lot of this data lives within your learning and your talent system, but it drives a lot of other factors like performance, like engagement and productivity. So being able to have this in place and ensure that employees have the confidence and the knowledge and the ability to do their job and identify where there's gaps so it can be fixed. This is, in essence, where Zeroed In started 18 years ago, is in learning and talent analytics and continued to open the aperture to where we are today.
Yeah, Chris, certainly impacted by COVID-19 and the great resignations. I think a lot of learning and development shops have been finding new ways to perform their initiatives, and especially some of our clients, mostly in like the healthcare space. This has been key, and we've been able to help them, look for different ways of becoming more efficient by, for example, looking at people that have completed compliance training so many times, so successfully in the past that maybe they don't have to do it the current year, and it's just made a lot of difference and improvement to their business.
Right on. So as we kind of capstone here and wrap up, we just want to highlight kind of some of the results and the takeaways. Again, Steve, Olaf, thank you so much for participating and sharing your experience, your journey. We're seeing that with a solid people analytics strategy, with a solid data pipeline, a consistent and scalable presentation and delivery method with curated insights that clients are reducing time and effort to the delivery of that. It's building confidence in the decisions you're making. It's giving them an understanding of not just what's happening and where, but why it's happening so that action can be taken. And that action, again, back to what gets measured gets funded. You can monetize that to build the business case. And this is where evidence-based decision-making really comes into play. It's pointing to the evidence, right? So with that, I know we have just a few minutes left. I would like to share a couple resources. We're going to be sharing, this deck is going to be shared out by Human Resource Executive. You're also going to be receiving a link to the video, that short, 4+ minute demo on YouTube. I encourage you to take a look at that. I think you'll find it interesting. These white papers and ebooks are available on Zeroed In. If you just use the QR code, you can download those. And we'd like to open the floor up to questions and answers. And whether it's for Keith and myself or Steve and Olaf, we will go ahead and open that up now.
All right, we do have some questions that have come in throughout. Let's start off. With hiring and retention being difficult, are you seeing companies use a solution like Zeroed In instead of hiring dedicated people analytics resource?
Yeah, actually we are. And I recall it was that there's a number of organizations that have had open, particularly in today's market, that have open recs for HR analytics resources or people analytics leads, and those positions are hard to fill, hard to find right now. And if you think about a solution like Zeroed In, particularly one that provides kind of that white glove concierge service along with the technology, it can really help fill that gap, and in many cases at the same cost as what that headcount might be fully loaded. So certainly people are taking that into account, even when they say people analytics isn't budgeted this year, but they have a headcount or two that hasn't been accommodated, of being able to shift that. So yeah, absolutely. Good question.
All right. Let's see. There's kind of a couple that are similar. Can you give an example of the transform part in ETL, like combining at first hand incompatible data from different sources into one clean database?
Keith,
And
you
then
wanna
kind of more
start that?
generally, just what are the best practices for cleaning people data?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a lot of joining data together. So if you can, if you have multiple different sources, and say you're using a key value like a department ID. We all know that the department name and all the other attributes could be different in all those different systems. So bringing that together is one form of that transformation. Others areas of transformation might be things like binning. For example, you have age, right? So categorizing your ages into logical bins can help in the presentation side as well.
Keith, I know, recall for the one of our municipality city clients, you had to take an old COBOL, or the team took an old COBOL mainframe data file that really had no unique identifiers in it relevant to what's now in AltiPro or UKG, and you had to match up that history. How did you do that?
That's a great point, Chris, and yeah, pretty fun effort. But we had to do everything such as building identifiers. So looking at in some of the older systems, they didn't have an identifier that we could use to relate to some of the newer HR systems. So we had to look at ways of taking additional pieces of an employee record, bringing together using what's called a message digest, or a method to create a hash value or a value that's unique based off of those things, but much smaller. And then we could use that to correlate people from one system to the next. So there are tools like that you can use. And of course, working with historical data from mainframes, you're talking about flat files that are very rigid and sometimes difficult to work with. But all part of the transformation process to combine it with more your recent data.
Great. Good information.
Okay, I'm seeing that we are coming up towards the top of the hour, but I do have a question here. What are some ways that you're seeing customers leverage data beyond the typical HR data sets?
Well, we certainly heard from Steve and Olaf, Dollar Tree, looking at sales and shrink and distribution center volumes. We've even experienced with organizations who, have people that work out in the field, right, looking at absenteeism, the outside field, looking at absenteeism in the context of weather patterns, right? Snow precipitation and snowfall. Does that, how is that affecting absenteeism? And of course, unemployment rates, is an external data point that is readily available through Department of Labor, although not always as quickly up to date as you might want it to be. But those all serve as great external points from which to compare, benchmark, and contrast.
And Chris, we've also worked in the healthcare space with healthcare clients and being able to pull in data from CMS, things like patient satisfaction scores, readmission
rates, right? Yeah,
right?
sure.
To see how that correlates to your HR data, everything from training and staffing, how that can relate to positive numbers from patients and readmission rates.
Excellent. Well, again, we'd like to thank everybody, especially Steve, Terry, Olaf from Dollar Tree and Family Dollar. Keith, thank you. And thank you, HR executive and attendees for joining the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.